The problem this time of year, the holidays, is keeping up with all of the festivities and activities. Don't get me wrong, it's really nice having company and going out to dinners with friends and going to parties and having people over, but keeping up with my home and meals this time of year can be pretty complicated. So for this Sunday reset, what I'm doing is just resetting my home and kitchen to get back to some sense of normalcy just through the work week. Really, right now, the name of the game for me is to just keep the momentum going. I'm not really getting into deep cleans or anything like that until after the new year, but I do need to maintain some sense of order amidst all of the holiday festivities. So right now, I am just getting my kitchen cleaned up. And one of the things I'm doing lately that I don't know why it took me so long to come to do this is I am using the delayed start on the dishwasher. So I am filling up my dishwasher with the dishes that I have, and then I'm getting it ready to go. And what I've been doing is setting it for a 4-hour delayed start. So that way we can just keep putting dishes in it for 4 hours, and whatever makes it in the dishwasher in those 4 hours will get cleaned automatically. And whatever doesn't make it into the dishwasher will just get in there in the next load. The other thing that I do during the day is I only let the dishwasher run on the 60-minute cycle. So that way I can just keep the flow going. With this method, sometimes the dishwasher is only half full when it runs, and in dishwashers of yesteryear, I probably wouldn't have done that, but they've changed a lot, and this is an energy efficient dishwasher, so I am okay with that. And also, doing a half load of dishes is better than doing no dishes at all, so we just do what we must. And I'm also just cleaning off my stovetop. This gets pretty grimy about every day. I try to clean it every evening, but lately I have been kind of slack on this. And after Thanksgiving, it definitely needs to be cleaned. So I am just wiping this down. But I do these Sunday reset videos once a month right now. And every Sunday reset and every one that I film is really different because I need something different every single week. And so sometimes I'm doing a lot of meal planning and freezer meals, but this week I really don't need to do a whole lot of that because life is really different during the holidays. We are going out to eat more. We have people coming over more. We've been getting takeout a little bit more. The energy of this season is just a little bit different. So I don't need a ton of stuff prepared right now. But we have been enjoying the flavors of this season: butter, sugar, cream, all of those delicious things. So I do want some veggie forward things in the kitchen right now that we can just grab and go. So first I am making a fire roasted tomato and veggie soup. And this is so good. You can get the recipe over my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. So just to start this, I am chopping up some onions and carrots, and you can put in as much or as little of onion and carrot as you want. Really, you can put anything in this that you want to, but I am just sauteing these in a little bit of olive oil and season with some salt and pepper just until they are tender crisp, about 8 to 10 minutes or so. Anytime you have those hard vegetables, they take a little bit longer. And while that is sauteing, I am peeling a sweet potato. Really, when I make this, I like to put 2 sweet potatoes in it, but I only had 1, so I just diced this up. And when those carrots and onions were done, I put the sweet potatoes right in there, sauteed them just for a minute, added in a little bit of minced garlic. I always recommend using a garlic press for this. It's so much easier than chopping up garlic by hand. And I'm adding in 1 box of chicken broth. Now I actually have chicken broth simmering on the stove right next to this, but it's not ready yet. And I have a little bit of chicken broth left over from Thanksgiving, so I just want to use that up. I'm also adding in some bay leaves and a little bit of oregano. You could use Italian seasoning, basil, whatever you want, you can put in there. And 1 can of fire roasted tomatoes. This is the secret ingredient. I tend to not use a ton of canned food, but these fire roasted tomatoes are definitely the secret ingredient that I do not recommend skipping in this recipe. And once this comes to a boil, I just let it cook, I think for about 15 minutes or so until those sweet potatoes are cooked through. And now I am adding in some freeze-dried cherry tomatoes, some green beans, and a little bit of kale. So those tomatoes were actually from our garden in the summer, but you could add in fresh cherry tomatoes too, and that would work just fine. You can use any veggies you want in here, but I would stick with hardy greens like kale or even Swiss chard just because they hold up better. And now I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, which is the other secret ingredient, and this is so good. I have a few more recipes I'll share with you later in the video, but first I need to deal with these super cute little kitschy dishes that I got from a thrift shop recently. I got a full set for $25 and this other cute dish. I'm trying to piece together some of these red dishes for the holidays, but they have all been living on my dining room table because I don't have any space for them right now. And I'm having a whole dinnerware crisis. It's like a different story in a different video, but I have these stupid Mikasa dishes that have not held up at all. So I'm running low on small plates and some small bowls. So we're just going to use these in the meantime. So I'm taking out some of my Mikasa dishes and hopefully never putting them back in my cabinet and organizing these in my kitchen cabinet. So that way we can use them. I used to kind of roll my eyes at things like holiday dishes because they seem so unnecessary. And at some level, I think they are actually relatively unnecessary. But one of the things I'm trying to do this holiday season and in this Sunday reset in particular is make it so we can enjoy the holidays really easily. Pull out a cute mug, fill it with coffee, and it feels festive. Have a little snack on a plate and it feels festive. So that's a pretty important part of this Sunday reset is just getting my house together and orderly enough so we can just enjoy the season. Unfortunately, part of that includes clean the floors, which is like one of my least favorite things to do. I don't know why. I just don't really like cleaning the floors that much, but after cooking Thanksgiving and doing some baking, the floors really need to be cleaned. The kitchen rugs need to be washed. So I'm throwing a few rugs in the laundry. And that's something I don't talk about a whole lot on my Sunday resets. I'm usually talking about food and meal planning, but a really important part of this is also just plain old cleaning and tidying up so the week feels better. But let's pause with the cleaning for a second and get back into some recipes. So I am making some holiday themed smoothies, and I go through these long phases in my life where I really like smoothies, and then I go through even longer phases where I really don't. And I'm in a smoothie mood right now. So I am putting together some freezer smoothie bags. Now I am making these with holiday spices just to keep them festive. But one of the tricks that I have for making smoothies is to pick ingredients that are pretty neutral and that you can mix up with any other types of fruits and any like almond butter or any type of almond milk or cashew milk. So that way it's neutral enough for you to build on. I don't taste spinach at all in smoothies, so I really like to pack these bags full of spinach. And this one is banana, spinach, vanilla, and a little bit of mint extract. And when I make it, I'll add in almond butter, some chocolate chips, and a little bit of almond milk. Another really great one to add into smoothies is riced cauliflower because it is pretty neutral. This is a gingerbread smoothie. It is banana, rice cauliflower, a little bit of molasses, cinnamon, ginger, a pinch of salt, and I think a little bit of vanilla too. And also I will add in some almond butter and a little bit of almond milk when I make this. Anytime I make a smoothie, I try to add some combination of a fruit and veggie, a banana, something green, usually spinach, spices if it is seasonally appropriate to do so, almond butter, and then some sort of milk. Usually I prefer almond milk. And technically I actually really like peanut butter in my smoothies, but we have a peanut allergy in my home, so it has to be almond butter in this case. So I just stash these in the freezer, and then every morning I throw it in the blender with a little bit of almond butter, a little bit of milk, and I adjust the spices if I need to, add a little bit of maple syrup, and it is an easy, healthy breakfast. Now I am getting our guest room / playroom back together. This room has been a work in progress for a long time. There's still a lot of stuff that needs to happen in here. But we have had company in town using this room, which half of it is a playroom and the other half is like a loungy / guest room area. And they have been using this as their bedroom. So I am getting this sofa bed back in order and getting this room back in shape. Part of my Sunday reset is just getting my house back into living condition. So I actually got this sofa bed off of Sam's Club and it is awesome. It's super easy to deal with. It's really comfortable and it's so easy to move around. So I'm just getting this put back and then I'm rearranging the room just a little bit so that way when our guests come back in a couple of weeks, it will be ready to use as a bedroom. And I am adding in this little artificial tree. So I got this off my neighborhood Facebook page. Someone was moving and I bought it for $20 off of them. So I'm just putting that in here, getting a ruggable down. This ruggable actually needs a pad. Funny story about our ruggables. We have 4. We've paid for 2 because they sent us the wrong one once and a damaged one once, but told us to keep those. So this is just an extra one that I have to get a pad for. But getting that room back in order really makes the house feel better because I can see that room from down the hallway. So anything that's in my line of sight, I need to be clean before the week starts. Last up on the Sunday reset docket is a potato soup. So I made a mistake with this one. First, I baked some potatoes and set them aside to cool, and then I was frying up some bacon, and you can see here, I put the onions right in with the bacon, and that was the mistake. I needed to take the bacon out. You'll see why in a minute, and I will give you a solution in a minute. But for now, I didn't even realize I did that. So I'm just sauteing the onions, deglazing the pan with a little bit of that homemade chicken broth, and then I'm just adding in enough broth, kind of eyeballing it to make a pot of soup. I'd say I probably put in about somewhere between like 4 and 6 cups of homemade chicken broth. And then I'm using a bag of riced cauliflower. I got 2 bags of this for my smoothies, but I only needed 1. So I'm just using that in this recipe, but you could use regular cauliflower too. And then I'm just adding in those potatoes and letting everything cook for a few minutes just until that riced cauliflower cooks down. So this is really like a loaded baked potato soup kind of. It's supposed to have a bacony flavor and bacon bits on top, but I forgot to take the bacon out. So here you can see where I stopped blending is when I realized that I was blending the bacon into my soup, which really made for a pretty weird texture. This was still really good. I mean, I put in heavy cream and sour cream and cheddar cheese. So, I mean, the flavor with that and bacon and potatoes, of course, it's going to be good. But the texture was really off because of that. So the one fix is just don't make that mistake. That'd be the best solution. But what I did is I actually later served this in some leftover sourdough bread bowls. And that really fixed the problem because the bread really just sort of hid that texture issue. And you just had what tasted like a really delicious bacony potato soup. So if you ever make that mistake, serve it with some bread, serve it with some toast, and it will be okay. My kitchen is way overdue for a deep cleaning, especially since we just got past the holidays and we were sick half of the time. So it is time to dive right into this deep clean. When I start a kitchen deep clean, the first place I like to begin is with the dishes. So I have the dishwasher completely emptied, and now I'm taking out this filter, which is disgusting, by the way. I was a little horrified when I pulled it out. And I am just simply cleaning that filter with an old Scrub Daddy. So one thing I like to do is when I have a Scrub Daddy that's about past its prime, I save it for really gross projects like this, so then I can just pitch it. But this actually cleaned up really easily. So I just rubbed it with a little bit of warm water and scrubbed it with my Scrub Daddy, and it looks as good as new. But the inside of my dishwasher is also pretty dirty too, and I will be honest with you, I don't think I've ever cleaned the tray on the top of the dishwasher and around the door before, and they had a lot of buildup on them. I've joked a lot on YouTube that the easiest way to ignore the mess is to just not look at it. Keep your eyes on the horizon. But the problem is when you take your eyes off of the horizon, like I'm doing today, suddenly you realize everything is dirty. So once I got down on the floor and started looking at the dishwasher, I realized even the sides of the cabinets right there are really dirty. So I scrubbed them down and really got things cleaned up around this space that I never pay attention to. And really, that's what deep cleaning is. It's going down into those deep spaces of the kitchen that you never look at, that you always ignore, and cleaning them. I can't say it's the most fun thing to do, but when you get all that grime off of there, it feels really good to get that stuff cleaned up. So this deep cleaning project is actually my Sunday reset for the week. And what's kind of ironic about that is I just published a blog over at moonandmagnolia.com about how to start a Sunday reset routine. I will leave that in the description box below for you. But in that, I said that a Sunday reset isn't the time for deep cleaning, but every once in a while it is. So on this deep cleaning day, I did not do any meal prep. I did not do anything like that at all. I am cooking dinner for the evening at the end of this video, so you can check that out. But this is just a different type of Sunday reset that has to happen once in a while. A deep cleaning requires a lot of shuffling around. So ideally, you would move basically everything off of your counters and get them completely cleaned off. My space was a little bit limited for that, so I did this in sections. Really, you should just do what works for you. But to really get down into the nitty-gritty, you do need to clean the counters off. I am starting over here where we keep our espresso machine, and this spot gets pretty dirty with coffee grinds, and there's also quite a few coffee stains over there. So I am using my new steam cleaner to clean the kitchen today. And I went back and forth about what the right type of steam cleaner was. Originally, I thought I wanted the handheld type of steam cleaner, but my husband suggested getting the type that rolls around that you can have like a nice long extension for. And I am glad that I got that type because it made it really easy. So once the steam cleaner is warmed up, you just put a cloth over the attachment and you can just steam away on the front of your cabinets. I would be mindful of how much steam you put on your cabinets if they are wood or laminate. I didn't have any problems with that, but just a heads up about that. One of the things I like so much about steam cleaning is that it doesn't require any additional cleaning products. There's this podcast I like to listen to sometimes called Frugal Friends Podcast, and they talk often about the trap of buying too many cleaning products, that we are marketed to and led to believe that we need a different type of cleaning product for every single thing we clean, when in reality, we probably only need a couple different types of products and tools. Now, there are a few cleaning products I like. I have a video where I showed those. I will leave that in the description box below. But for the most part, I can get away with probably like 3 or 4 cleaning products. And now with this steam cleaner, maybe even fewer than that. The hardest part in my kitchen to keep clean is over by the stove, and that's probably the hardest spot for most people. But given the way I cook, which is relatively southern and a little country style cooking, a lot of butter, a lot of grease, bacon, fat, those sorts of very delicious things, it can be hard to keep the cabinets next to the stove clean, and especially the cabinets above the stove. So I am allotting myself some extra time to clean over here. And that is one of the important parts of deep cleaning, especially if you're intertwining it like I am with something like a Sunday reset, is really just pick the things that you can really get into and fully clean, and the job is done when you are out of time. If you try to get into too many projects, and if you say like, well, I'm going to deep clean this house from top to bottom today, it might be a little difficult to get that done. But if you say, I'm going to make sure I get all of the cabinets cleaned today, that is totally possible to do. Here I am trying out my new spin scrub brush on the backsplash because that is also something I have allotted time for today. So this Grout is now just under 5 years old and it has gotten pretty nasty. My husband actually just recaulked behind the sink, and now I really need to clean that Grout because now that there's nice bright white caulking, the Grout looks disgusting. Now, unlike the steam cleaner, I have found that this scrub brush does work better with a cleaner, and I actually don't have a lot of cleaners right now. I got this Dawn Power Wash to try to clean my Dutch oven. If you've watched a couple videos in the past, I had an epic battle with my Dutch oven that I couldn't get clean. So I had some of that Dawn Power Spray left over, and I used that. It worked fine. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it did get the job done. That little spinny scrub brush gadget worked great, and it is awesome for cleaning the sink. This is probably what it is best for. It did great on the Grout, but the sink can be really hard to clean, especially getting up underneath of the countertop. There was a lot of buildup under there that, one, I didn't know about, and two, I couldn't get off by hand, and it did a great job taking that off. And it's also really useful for cleaning the drain. This, I've heard, is one of the dirtiest and most bacteria-ridden places in a kitchen, and it was really useful for cleaning that space up too. My sink was sparkly clean by the time I was done. I will leave links for this and the steam cleaner in the description box if you want to check them out. My camera did die, and so while it was charging, I did finish up the bottom cabinets and the kitchen island. But the other thing that I wanted to share with you is cleaning this stove. So once my camera was charged, I cleaned this stove first using this scrub brush again. And now this comes with multiple attachments. So you can use one brush, say, for your sink and one for your stove. You can have one that you use separately for your bathroom or something like that, so you don't have to worry about any cross contamination. But now I am using it to clean my stove, and I have a couple spots on my stove that I have not been able to get off. And this helped a lot getting off a lot of that grease and grime. There were a few spots that I just still could not get off my stove. I don't know if I need a degreaser or if it's just permanently on there. It was actually candied jalapenos, the sugary syrup spilled on there, and it's just burned on for life, I guess. And then I also took the steam cleaner and ran it around the edges of the stove and even over the burners to loosen up some of that grease and grime, and it worked great. This spot was filthy. This is the edge of the cabinet underneath of the microwave, and the steam cleaner took all of that off, and this looks beautiful. When the kitchen and the stove are so clean, it almost seems like a shame that we have to cook in it again and make a mess again. But that's what kitchens are for. And really, that's what a deep clean is for. It's to get everything back to square one so the daily cleanup and the routine cleanup is easier. I mean, eventually I'm going to have to deep clean the kitchen again. It just happens inevitably, but in between that time, it is easier to just wipe things down and keep things tidy. And I also feel extra motivated to do that after doing a deep clean. So it's worth it for the clean itself right now, but also it's helping out future you because it's easier to keep tidy. And when things are clean and tidy, it just feels better. Okay, so now that the kitchen is clean and organized and just easier to be in, it is time to make dinner. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this is not my typical Sunday reset. Usually I do a lot of meal prep, but this is just plain old dinner, but it happens to be a New Year's dinner and a very Southern one at that. I am making collard greens, black-eyed peas, and cornbread. The collard greens represent money, the cornbread represents gold, and the black-eyed peas represent luck. And here in the South, it is said that if you eat this on New Year's Day, you will get money, gold, and luck in the year to come. So that is my kind of Sunday reset. So I might not be doing meal prep, but I am still prepping for the year. I have heard a lot of people say that when you make collard greens, you should de-rib them. I don't do that. Now, I do take off that bottom tough part of the stem, but I leave the ribs on because they soften and they get really tender and delicious if you cook them for a few hours like I am here. So first, what I'm doing is I'm taking a full pack of bacon and I'm just throwing it right into a cast iron Dutch oven and cooking it until the fat has rendered out. Then I'm removing half of it and setting that aside for the black-eyed peas later. Then I am sauteing some onion and deglazing the pot with chicken broth. And don't forget to scrape that fond off the bottom of the pot because that is delicious flavor. Now, I had these collard greens soaking in some water just because when they're grown locally, they get sandy sometimes. That helps the sand get off. And then I am draining them and putting them right into the pot with more broth. Now, the thing is, these collard greens are going to cook down significantly, so you need a lot less broth than what you would think initially. I'd say I probably put somewhere between 4 and 5 cups of chicken broth in. And now I am adding in 2 spoonfuls of brown sugar, which is a secret ingredient to collards, some apple cider vinegar. Often these are made spicy. I just did not make them spicy because my 3-year-old eats these. but you could also put in some red pepper flakes. That is delicious. But I just seasoned these with some salt and pepper, brought it to a boil, reduced it to a simmer, and then covered it and let it cook for about 3 to 4 hours. I am now milling some hard white wheat for cornbread. Cornbread is usually made with part cornmeal and part all-purpose flour, but I am transitioning from using store-bought flour to fresh milled flour, either 100% or, like in this case, just partially fresh milled flour. So this is 1 cup of cornmeal and 1 cup of fresh milled flour. And then I'm adding in, I think it was like maybe 2/3 of a cup of sugar, some salt, a teaspoon and a half, I think, of baking powder, mixing that together. And then I am adding in the wet ingredients. And what I like about this is it is a 1 bowl recipe. So I'm adding in some milk, a little bit of melted butter, and an egg. You could definitely throw in some sourdough discard if you have some. I actually just posted on my blog over on moonandmagnolia.com a full tutorial on how to put sourdough discard into any recipe. I will leave that in the description box below, but that is definitely applicable to this recipe. And now I am just pouring that batter into a buttered dish and baking it at 400 degrees, I think for about 30 minutes. That hard wheat that I milled does require a little bit more moisture. So next time I think I will increase the milk a little bit and maybe even add a little bit of honey just to sweeten it a little more while still adding moisture. But while that is baking, I am making black-eyed peas, and these came from our garden. This is our first year growing black-eyed peas, or cow peas as they are sometimes called, and they were delicious. I just cooked them with some freeze-dried onions and that bacon and chicken broth. And this was a delicious Southern New Year's meal that hopefully is also a Sunday reset filled with money, gold, and luck for the year ahead. Month over the last few months, I have been posting a Sunday reset routine to show you different ways that I prepare for the week ahead on Sundays. Now, the footage that you see in this video isn't actually happening as a Sunday reset. I just filmed a number of things that I'm doing throughout the week to give you some ideas of things that you can do and make for a Sunday reset. But along the way, I want to talk about how you can start a Sunday reset routine that is practical, that is doable, and that can be sustainable. In case you are wondering what I'm doing in the video though, right now I am making a sourdough roasted garlic, herb, and cheese bread. So I'm actually recipe testing this. Eventually this will make its way to my blog, but for now I am just trying out this recipe. In short, this is my regular no-knead sourdough bread recipe, which you can find over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. But this is about 375 grams of all-purpose flour and then 100 grams of fresh milled hard white wheat. And then I'm adding inclusions. So inclusions in sourdough are where you take other ingredients and work them into the dough, which I'll show you how to do later in this video. But for this one, the first thing I need to do is roast the garlic. To do that, I just chopped the top of the garlic off, I'd say about a 1/4 inch or so, put it in a little bit of aluminum foil, drizzled it with some olive oil, and then roasting it at 400 degrees for I'd say about 45 minutes or so, or until it starts to turn golden and it's nice and soft. And it really smells good when it's ready to come out of the oven. So once your house really starts to smell like lovely roasted garlic, that's usually about the time it needs to come out of the oven. We will get back to the bread and some other recipes in a little bit, but I think it's important to first note, what is a Sunday reset? Sure, it can be a time when you bake bread or make a bunch of meals or clean your house, but really at its heart, a Sunday reset is an intentional routine where you tackle the must-dos for the week ahead. I think the key phrases here are intentional routine and must-dos. A Sunday reset is an intentional routine, meaning that it is not willy-nilly, that you know exactly what needs to be done. You're not deciding it on a whim. It is very clear and it is very methodical, but you're also doing that to tackle the must-dos. That means you have to know what is happening in the week ahead as best as you can. Of course, there's always curveballs, but that's why we do this Sunday reset routine. So the must-dos are already taken care of and we can handle the curveballs. In the past, my Sunday reset routines that were just like willy-nilly, where I just did stuff without intention, where I just filled up some time doing things that I thought needed to be done, weren't really successful and they didn't offer me much down the line. But when I got really intentional with what I'm doing and what purpose is it serving, that becomes really sustainable and very repeatable because it's useful. Now here I am making some sourdough cheddar crusted pork chops. I've made these on YouTube before, and you can get this full recipe over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. But essentially these are pork chops that are just dipped in a milk and egg mixture and then dredged through sourdough breadcrumbs and some shredded cheddar cheese. And then I bake these on a hot stone at 425, I'd say for about 20 minutes or so, really until the internal temperature reaches 145. You can definitely make these ahead of time. I know breaded foods like this tend to get a little soft, but when you reheat them on a hot stone or even in an air fryer, which is a great way to reheat breaded food, they crisp up beautifully. So you can make a double or a triple batch of these and then reheat them. And I'm pairing these with some homemade instant potatoes that I made in my freeze dryer. I actually showed how to do this in a freeze drying video a few weeks ago. I'll leave that in the description box below. But anytime that you can make convenience foods, preserve anything, freeze a few extra things that you can just grab during the week, that is time well spent, whether it's on a Sunday or any day of the week. Okay, let's talk about a few things that you can actually do in a Sunday reset routine. First of all, you can declutter, which is always helpful. So you can clean off any surfaces that need to be decluttered, such as the kitchen table or your desk, clean out your purse, take any trash out of the car, or if you're me, take out any extra toys out of the car, put away any toys or clutter back in their designated spaces. You can clean. For a Sunday reset though, I wouldn't worry about deep cleaning. This is not the time to clean out the basement and to really get down and scrub the baseboards. Instead, get the dishes done, wipe down the counters, sweep the floor, empty all of the trash cans, those sorts of small cleaning tasks. You can organize, get your calendar together, clean off your desk, as I mentioned before, review the week's to-dos, get your goals set, anything that you need to do to get organized and tidy. And then, of course, you can meal prep, which is the one I lean on the most because cooking takes up the most time for me during the week. So you can make a double batch of your favorite dinners. I'm going to show you one of my favorite dinners to double up on later in this video. You can chop any fruits and veggies for recipes or even just for snacks. Make a big pot of grains such as millet, rice, or any other type of grain that you like, or you can prep individual snacks in containers or bags. You can also bake bread, which I really like to do on Sundays because for me, it's a little bit relaxing too. So I like to make a week's worth of bread at one time. And I even freeze that bread because there's just 3 of us. So that way we don't have to rush to get through it. And of course, you can always do laundry. You can get enough laundry done for the week. I always try to fold it and put it away. But to be honest with you, I'm not very good at that part. In my mind, I plan on folding it and putting it away, but I do get it washed. And then put any unwashed clothes in the hamper. Let's talk about the inclusions for this sourdough. So the garlic is roasted and ready to go. I chopped up some basil, thyme, and sage. Those herbs were actually from the grocery store because I'm recipe testing and my herb garden is not ready yet. It's still too early in the season. So I had to go ahead and get them from the store, which I would not recommend. They are expensive. It's worth the wait for your garden. And to do inclusions, all you do is 1 round of stretch and folds to help build that gluten strength. And then on the second set of stretch and folds, so do them once, let it rest for 15 minutes. And then the second set, add your inclusions in. I like to do half a couple stretch and folds and then add the other half of the inclusions and do a few stretch and folds. And as you work through your cycles of stretch and folds over an hour or 2 hours, however long that you're doing them, those inclusions will work themselves into the dough. As you are figuring out your Sunday reset routine, I have a few tips for you to keep in mind. Number 1, think about future you. If you're already meal prepping, for example, can you make extra and freeze it so you have it for a few weeks down the line? What can you do this week to help future you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Set a timer for each task you do. Don't get stuck on it for too long. Give yourself 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is to do that task, and don't go over that. And in that same vein, I also recommend setting an allotted time for the entire Sunday reset routine, just so you can strike a good balance between enjoying your Sunday and also getting things done. Number 3, use tools. Use any apps and technology to help you get it done. Use an online scheduler. Use whatever it is that helps you get stuff done. I really love my Echo Show that helps me stay really organized. I keep it on the wall in my kitchen. So if you have something like that, use it. Number 4, create a vibe. Turn on some music, open the windows, make it enjoyable, sing your heart out, whatever it is you need to do to enjoy your Sunday reset routine. And number 5, maybe most importantly, evaluate weekly. Adjust your routine based upon what worked well last week and what you need for the week ahead. It is okay and totally normal if your Sunday reset routine changes from week to week. There is a season for everything, so just roll with it. Okay, last thing about the bread. I promise this is it. So, with this bread, I actually did not like the cheese in it. I don't think it's that I don't like cheese in bread because I like cheese in everything, but I particularly did not like that Asiago cheese. So, I am going to recipe test that again and I will follow up in a future video. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to the email list so that way when that herb bread recipe is perfected and goes live, I can send it right to your inbox. The link to sign up is in the description box below. One of the pinch points in our weeks lately has been snacks. Really, my dinner game is pretty down. Breakfast is really easy, but snacks are pretty hard lately because I don't want to bring in a bunch of junk food, but I also don't really have a ton of snack recipes. So I am working on adding in snacks into my Sunday reset routine, and I am recipe testing some hummus. So I got a bag of dried chickpeas from my last Azure Standard haul, and I cook them in the Instant Pot. So when you cook dried chickpeas in the Instant Pot, you don't have to soak them. You can just add 2 cups of liquid per 1 cup of chickpeas and then cook them, I would say, for 50 minutes. I did 45 minutes. In hindsight, I think they would have been better if they would have cooked a little bit longer. But when you cook them for 50 minutes, basically that does the quick soak for you. So you don't have to worry about soaking them overnight when you do it that way. And I am making a really simple hummus with those chickpeas. So I doubled this recipe so we have a really big batch of it. And I think that was 3 cups of cooked chickpeas that I put in the food processor. And then I added, I think it was about 3 or so tablespoons of water just to help them get going in the food processor, a little bit of salt, some lemon. And then I also added in this chili infused oil from a local restaurant that is delicious. And then just blended them up in the food processor until they were creamy. But what I like about something like hummus is that it solves a lot of problems. So I can make this on Sunday, and then throughout the entire week, we have hummus and some chopped veggies and crackers to dip in it. It's great on wraps and sandwiches. It's good to dip bread in. It's also delicious on a salad. So there are a lot of different ways that we can enjoy hummus throughout the week. And so anytime I'm working through a Sunday reset, I often try to figure out recipes that can serve multiple functions or multiple purposes during the coming days. It's really just a better bang for your buck that way. I have mentioned a lot that my Sunday reset routine changes from week to week, and there are seasons where I just need some things more than others. But in general, for my personal Sunday reset routine, I usually do some combination of grocery shopping, food prep. I like to wash all of my daughter's clothes on my Sunday reset. I try to get my clothes in there too, but definitely my daughter's clothes. I bake my bread for the week. I wash all the dishes. I mean, dishes are like a daily thing, but I try to make sure on Sunday night, every single dish in the house is clean. So on Monday, we can just start fresh in the kitchen. I like to restock all of the kitchen towels, review my calendar and to-do list, and then also tidy up the living areas. I mentioned earlier that a Sunday reset isn't really a time for deep cleaning. And I do think sometimes a Sunday reset can be a great time for deep cleaning. I think I did that in January. I did a deep clean for a January Sunday reset video. But generally, a Sunday reset is a shorter amount of time than what you would probably have for deep cleaning. So, when it comes to cleaning during a Sunday reset, I really encourage you just to do the little things. And really, if you do just a couple little cleaning tasks, sweep, maybe mop the floor, wipe down the counters, clean the bathrooms really quickly, those sorts of things, they really start to add up to a lot of help and really makes you feel better during the week. Of course, when you deep clean your house, it feels really great. But unless deep cleaning is your jam, which for some people it is, it brings them life, not me so much. But generally speaking, deep cleaning is a bigger project than what a Sunday reset is. Because remember, a Sunday reset is an intentional routine during an allotted amount of time that is manageable and sustainable and that you can do every week without dreading it. Okay, let's talk about this homemade sloppy joes recipe. This is a family favorite, and I think it might be one of my husband's all-time favorite foods. So this recipe is one of my favorites for meal prepping because it's really easy to double, triple, or even quadruple. Not all recipes lend themselves to multiplying, but this one really does. To make a single batch of this homemade sloppy joes recipe, first just brown 1 pound of ground beef in a Dutch oven. And once it's almost brown, maybe just still a little bit of pink, throw in about a half of an onion minced. And once the onion is translucent, things start to get really easy. Throw in about 1 cup of ketchup, approximately a third a cup of water, 1 tablespoon of dark brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of yellow mustard, a half a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce, and a teaspoon of chili powder, and some salt and pepper to taste. But the thing is, those ingredients, you can eyeball them and it will be good no matter what. Oh, and I think I also added in a few cloves of minced garlic. But the thing is about a recipe like this, it's really helpful on a Sunday reset because you're trying to get a few things done. And so don't get bogged down during your Sunday reset with complicated recipes that take forever. Choose recipes that you can double or triple really easily and that you don't really have to worry about that much. Just throw the ingredients in there. You can kind of taste test it along the way and see how it goes. But anything that can be made like that on the fly on a Sunday reset, that is super helpful. And I think it's really important to mention that the benefits of sticking with a Sunday reset routine extends far beyond just getting things done. A Sunday reset routine can offer mental clarity. A clean and tidy space feels better. And by prepping meals or ticking off a couple tasks in advance, you have less to think about during the week. So it's clearing up the mental load a little bit. It offers less stress. You can start the week feeling prepared instead of feeling behind before you even got going. It can improve your productivity. You can focus on other more important parts of a productive week when the tedious tasks are done. And you can also handle curveballs with a little more ease. And also, maybe most importantly, a Sunday reset routine can include and offers self-care. You can build self-care into your Sunday reset. And also by getting things done on Sunday, you can free up some time during the week to do the things you actually enjoy doing instead of feeling bogged down with the mundane day-to-day tasks. It's funny because often when I feel overwhelmed, I tend to forego a Sunday reset because it feels just like one more thing to do and I'm just willfully plowing through my day. However, every single time I come back to the same realization. I feel better when I reset for the week and get my house and my life in order as best as I can, of course. The weight and worry of getting the task done is often worse than the task itself. So, handling those tedious tasks beforehand frees you up to be more focused, more productive, and hopefully just a little bit more easeful during the week. And maybe most importantly, as you work through these tasks, as you build your Sunday reset routine, just remember it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. None of the things that you do on your Sunday reset routine or any other day of the week have to be perfect, but generally, these are just things that we have to do whether we like it or not. So we might as well get them done in a way that feels manageable, that is useful, and that can make our days ahead feel better. Not every Sunday has to be packed full of meal prep and freezer meals. Sometimes all I need to do is just get a few things done, and that is what is happening today. I am enjoying a relaxed Sunday reset for the week ahead. The night before filming this, I got some whole grain sourdough sandwich bread dough going. I made this with fresh milled hard white wheat. Often, because I need the light for filming to put things on YouTube, I make my sourdough bread dough in the morning and then I bake it in the evening. It's just easier to film that way. But really, in my regular day to day, I really prefer making the dough at night and then letting it bulk ferment while I sleep. I think that's the most effective way to make sourdough bread, because while you're sleeping, it's just doing its thing. And then in the morning, you can shape it and let it go for its second rise. And that's one of the things that I really like about sourdough is because it does take a long time to ferment, it's actually more flexible with schedules, at least in my opinion, in my experience. So if it works better for you to make the dough in the morning, then totally by all means do that. Now, like I mentioned, this is whole grain wheat, so it takes a little longer to rise. I let it go for a second rise, probably for about 4 hours before baking it in the oven at 375 for about 45 minutes. This is actually my regular sourdough sandwich bread recipe, which is over on my blog. The only thing that's different here is that I used fresh milled flour rather than regular all-purpose flour. We will revisit that bread toward the end of the video when we eat it for dinner. But about a week ago, I made a bunch of fall freezer meals. They are actually in a fall freezer meal video that I posted on YouTube. I will leave a link for that in the description box so you can check it out. But we've actually been eating those freezer meals all week, so I don't really need a whole lot of meal prep. But I do have some pantry items that need to be dealt with. So I have these big bags of dried beans that I got from Sam's. So I am going to cook some of them and freeze them so I can use them in a week or two. And then the rest I'm actually going to store for long-term storage. To cook beans for freezing, ideally you want to undercook them slightly. I reduced the time by 2 minutes. Next time I think I'll reduce the time by 5 minutes in the pressure cooker. They were still pretty perfectly cooked. But on this particular Sunday, it is a pretty chill day at home. So while the beans were cooking, I did a few other tasks. And I think that's kind of a nice way sometimes to approach a Sunday reset, because often we have this block of time on Sundays, we're going to bust out all these freezer meals and get all these things done. But it is nice sometimes to do all of these tasks and chores in a way that feels a little more leisurely. We'll get back to the beans in a little bit when they are cooked. And in the meantime, my daughter and I are making some einkorn chocolate chip cookies. And I am making these with 100% whole grain, fresh milled einkorn flour. So the reason why I am making these cookies on my Sunday reset is because I need pictures of them for my blog, because I put out the blog post for the einkorn cookies this week. So sometimes my Sunday resets are really about getting a lot of meals made and food made, but other times I need other things done to make my week easier. I've shared a lot of Sunday resets over the last couple of months that have freezer meal ideas and ingredient prep ideas, but sometimes for me, the best thing I can do is get a couple of tasks checked off that are easy and fun for me to do on a Sunday afternoon with my daughter, for example. You can get the recipe for these einkorn chocolate chip cookies over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. And really, this is a pretty classic chocolate chip cookie recipe. The only real difference is that it uses einkorn flour, and I also always add in an extra egg yolk to my cookies because it makes them so rich and delicious. If you don't have einkorn flour, in most recipes, you can swap einkorn with whole wheat flour at a 1-to-1 ratio. Now here, what I want to show you is half of the cookies I made on a regular baking sheet with parchment paper and half I made on a stone cookie sheet. And even though it's the exact same cookie, they baked totally differently. The cookies on the left are from the regular baking sheet and the cookies on the right are from the stone cookie sheet. And what's really interesting is the stone took half the time as the regular cookie sheet and they still got darker. So I don't know if one's better than the other, but the end result is really different between the two different types of baking sheets. And just one other little hot tip about cookies. If you want a thin cookie like the ones I made, as soon as they come out of the oven, take a fork and just press some of the air out of them. And if you want a fluffier cookie, chill them in the fridge for about 30 minutes or so before baking them. But in the meantime, the beans are done. So once the beans are finished in the Instant Pot, I am putting them on a cookie sheet. We're here again. And I am smoothing them over into a single layer just so they can cool faster. The deal with freezing anything is you always want the food to be completely down to room temperature before bagging it. And ideally, if you can even refrigerate it overnight, that's even better, but I don't always have time to do that. So while the black beans are cooling, I am then making some pinto beans. And I have these giant bags of beans that I don't want to store in plastic because I want them to stay good for a long time, of course. And also, I promise you, I'm going to knock that bag over and spill it in the pantry. So I really love these containers. I got these from Sam's Club. This is actually what I store all of my wheat berries in too. So I washed them and made sure they were completely dry. You don't ever want to store anything in a container that has water in it because that will create mold. And then those go right into the pantry. And once the beans are dry, I am scooping them up and putting them into sandwich bags. So a can of beans usually has about a cup and a half of beans in it. I tried to put a cup and a half into each bags, but my 3-year-old was helping me. So who knows how much is really in there. I kind of lost track along the way, but I am putting these in sandwich bags. Honestly, I think a food saver is a better route for this because it's easier to seal them and bag them flat. Anytime I can, I try to freeze my food in like a thin, flat sheet because it thaws a lot faster. But I did not feel like busting out my vacuum sealer. Sometimes the noise scares my daughter a little bit, so it's just easier to do it this way. But once I have everything bagged up, I'm then putting it in a freezer bag. Dried beans are a super budget-friendly way of keeping healthy food around, but they're not very convenient unless you have them prepared in advance. So obviously I froze these. I really wanted to can them, but I just didn't really feel like canning them on this particular day because I was just trying to chill at home and enjoy my Sunday with my daughter. But I will be canning beans soon and sharing that on YouTube, so stay tuned for that. We have plenty of food left from those freezer meals, but we do have some veggies in the fridge that need to be used up, and I try to keep my daughter a part of the grocery shopping experience and ask her what she wants to have. And so when my husband and my daughter were out at the store, she picked out some corn on the cob. Maybe not my go-to for October, but she loves it. So I am making this on a sheet pan. And I'll be honest, this was the first time I've ever roasted corn on the cob in the oven. And it was really good, by the way. So I am just putting the corn and rainbow cauliflower, also from Sam's Club. Obviously, we went on a Sam's Club shopping trip recently. And I'm putting that on a preheated baking stone and then smothering it with butter, some salt and pepper, and then some freeze-dried mixed herbs from our garden. And then I'm popping this right in the oven. I think it was at 425 for about 20 minutes. Every Sunday reset is a little bit different and the needs for the week ahead are different. So how I handle that, of course, is different. But almost every single time I like to prep some veggies in advance so that way we have nutritious food that can be just thrown into anything. My husband has to go into the office a few times a week, so he packs a lunch and throws veggies in it. We put it on rice bowls, we throw it into tacos, soups, whatever we are having. And the other thing I am doing this evening is making a meatloaf because even though we have those freezer meals, we are starting to get a little bit low. And by the end of the week, we are going to want some other things to eat. And a meatloaf this time of year is a go-to. Now, this is the most simple meatloaf, just simple ground beef, some sourdough breadcrumbs, which I've shared on YouTube a lot, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, or however you say it, I always say that wrong, salt, pepper, and the secret ingredient, if you ask me, is celery seed. Oh, and 2 eggs. And I'm just putting it in this little loaf pan. Fun fact, I have had this loaf pan for more than 20 years. It's a little hard to see here, but I am topping it with ketchup, honey, and a little bit of cumin. I also really like that with sriracha in it too for a little extra spice, but because we have a 3-year-old eating it, I usually leave that out. And my husband made one of his all-time favorite things with it, a meatloaf sandwich, and made with that whole grain sourdough bread from the beginning of the video. Not every Sunday reset has to be packed full of tasks for the week ahead. Sometimes it's nice just to enjoy a few leisurely things that can be helpful during the week ahead, but also giving yourself the space to just enjoy being home. It's not the day-to-day things at home that really start to build up and make a lot of mess for me. I'm able to manage things like the dishes and wiping down the counters and taking care of those things most days. But there are a lot of parts of maintaining and cleaning a kitchen that I just don't get to all of the time. So today we are going to do a really practical kitchen deep clean where you can do some of this or all of this in just a few hours. If you have a lot of time, say you have all day or you are using your entire weekend to do a really big deep clean, it's kind of like a free for all. But I actually only have a couple of hours while my daughter is in preschool to get things going here and to wrap up all of these projects. So when I'm trying to deep clean and I don't have a lot of time, the first thing I do is I break it up into sections. How you section off your kitchen or categorize it in your mind really depends on what you need to get done and the layout of your kitchen. But this really helps with the practical approach to deep cleaning because by sectioning it, you are reminding yourself that you don't have to get everything done. You just have to get these parts that you've identified done. It can feel really overwhelming to just look at your kitchen and say, oh, I have to clean this entire thing. But if you say, I just need to clean these 3 parts of my kitchen today, you can get a lot cleaned inside those 3 parts and a lot more than what you thought needed to be cleaned. So once I moved that coffee maker, for example, I did not know how dirty this switch for my garbage disposal was. So by sectioning it off and just cleaning that one section, you can look at it a little more clearly without worrying about all the other stuff. So I'm thinking about my kitchen in sections, and then in each section, I have tasks that I want to get done. So the first thing I want to get done is clear off the counters. The second thing I want to get done is wipe off the backsplash and the counters. And the third thing I want to get done in each section is wipe down the cabinets. And so by identifying that, I know what needs to be done in the entire kitchen in each section that I've identified. For me, part of clearing off the counter means also cleaning the thing that was on the counter. I try not to keep too much on my counters, but I do have some appliances that I use all the time, like my coffee maker, and it was really dirty. Every time I do a kitchen deep clean, I feel like I don't want to share the dirty things because it's like kind of gross. But when you pull out that tray, there's a lot of water and coffee that gets down in there, and it really needed to be washed. So I cleaned that out. I wiped down the coffee maker, and then I also cleaned all of the parts that go to the coffee maker. And one thing that I was surprised is how dirty the cord actually was too. So when you're cleaning these appliances, wipe them down top to bottom, front, sides, and back. Clean any parts that belong to them, and then also wipe down those cords because we don't think about that much, but they have a lot of dirt and dust on that just sit on our countertops all the time. During the day to day, I always wipe down my coffee maker after I use it, but I never actually clean underneath of it or clean the cord. And I also keep a container of coffee beans behind it, and I never really wipe that down either. So these are the things that start to collect a lot of dust and grime that need to be wiped down. But what's important to note here is that these aren't things I do every day. Don't waste your time during a kitchen deep clean, whether it's a full-blown all weekend deep clean or if it's just a practical one that you're doing like I am in a few hours. Don't waste your time doing the things that you always clean every day. You'll get to that later in the day because it has to be done anyway. Do the things that you can't get to every single day and identify which tasks are important enough to actually do. You could definitely get down on hands and knees and scrub your baseboards and scrub your floor by hand, but is that the most important thing that needs to get done during your deep clean? For me, it's not. I can do those things during the weekend. It's a lot easier to get my family involved for those sorts of tasks. In fact, we have been doing lately a family deep clean task every weekend. We work together to shampoo the carpets. Next weekend, we're working together to clean the baseboards. But these sorts of things, honestly, it's just easier for me to do myself, and it's more beneficial in the moment for me to do it now. Okay, let's talk about clearing clutter during a practical deep clean. Since I'm already taking everything off of the counter, this is the perfect time to get rid of anything that's been sitting around unused or replace with something more practical. I don't know if I'd really consider myself a minimalist, so to speak, but I do like to just keep things on my counter that I use all of the time and that are easy to clean. And during these deep cleaning sessions, it's pretty easy to identify things that just have been sitting around and have kind of been forgotten about and that are just collecting dirt. So the two things I have my sight set on this particular deep clean is the lamp in my kitchen and then the block that holds my knives. So the lamp in the kitchen I got for like $5 years ago at Home Goods, and the issue with that is it has a fabric shade. So over time it's just been collecting a lot of dust and grime and grease from cooking, and I just can't get it off the shade. And then on top of that, I also broke the attachment that goes to it, so it needs to be replaced. I'll show you what I did with that in just a minute. But the block for my knives, I just don't use all the knives in there, and that block collects a ton of dust and it's hard to clean without taking every single knife out. So I actually need to find a better solution for my knives, which I have not figured out yet. If you have any great ideas, let me know in the comments, because I just don't want that block sitting on the counter. Here I am cleaning out my utensil crock. This is one that goes unnoticed a lot in the kitchen. So I took out this little insert that my husband 3D printed for me because those metal utensils were hitting the bottom really hard and I was afraid it was going to crack. So I gave those a good wash and dry, but these are some pretty commonly overlooked items for me. I always wash my utensils in the dishwasher, but I don't always wash the holder. So when you are cleaning your kitchen, think about those items that need to be wiped down or maybe even decluttered that we often forget about. Things like the utensil crock, the knife block, salt, pepper, any spice jars, oil and vinegar bottles, of course your coffee maker, any pod baskets, cutting boards, canisters, your mixer, in my case a grain mill, if you have a paper towel holder, any bowls that you have sitting out, cookbooks, which I'll show you that in a minute. If you have any mail or paper sitting around, getting rid of that stuff, and then making sure if you have a charging station or any cords in your kitchen that they are cleaned out, tidy, and wiped down. As you are decluttering and wiping things down, washing and drying them, or maybe even getting rid of them, make sure that you are putting them back in their rightful home immediately. I have made the mistake in the past of decluttering and then I have a pile of stuff that I don't want and it has nowhere to go, or I wash and dry a whole bunch of things. I just let them sit out to air dry and now I have a big pile of things to put away later. So if you put things away as you go, when you're actually finished cleaning, you have a finished product. The whole job is done when you have finished cleaning. Whereas if you don't do that, now you have another job to do after you finish deep cleaning. And my general rule is if I don't have a home for it and if I can't find a home for it, it has to go. Now, two things that I always clean during a deep clean is the stove and the sink. I always save the sink for last because it gets dirtier and dirtier as the deep cleaning goes. So I save that for last, but the stove, I always scrub down. I have some burned on food on my stove that I just cannot get off. If you have any recommendations for how to get that off, let me know in the comments. I scrubbed until my elbow hurt and it didn't budge. But otherwise, I just scrubbed the stove down. The one thing I really wish I could have gotten to this day, which I did not have time for, was to clean my oven. But I think that just goes back to what I was saying before, to section things off and to do things that you know you can get done within that amount of time. And the rest of it, don't worry about it. I mean, worry not, because that mess will still be there later so I can get to the oven later. It's more important to get things done that I know I can finish. I also didn't bother with wiping down the front of my appliances. I do that, I'd say probably about once a month or so, or of course as needed. But at this point during my deep clean, I needed to go pick up my daughter and I really wanted to focus on cleaning out some of the drawers and a few other tasks rather than worrying about something that I can squeeze into just about any part of my day. But while I was out getting my daughter, I stopped at Home Goods to find a glass lamp. And I replaced my lamp with this one. This is not my forever lamp in my kitchen. In fact, I've already replaced it with something I like much better. This isn't really the aesthetic I was going for, but the other thing about this lamp, I don't want anything that's open on the top because that means dust and grease and dirt are going to go inside and settle at the bottom. So I replaced it with like a Tiffany fake lamp that I got off of Amazon. I'll show that in an upcoming video. So that way anything can land on the top of the shade and then I can just wipe it off and keep it really clean and tidy. During a deep clean like this, I think it's really important to keep your other tasks really simplified that day. So just because you're deep cleaning your kitchen doesn't mean you don't have to feed your family. So I am making lunch for my daughter and me, and I'm keeping it super simple. I'm just making a really easy grilled cheese with some frozen bread I have. This is actually fresh milled sourdough Pullman bread. I have have the recipe for that over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave it in the description box below. But by keeping that lunch really simple, that gives me a little more time and space to do some other tasks, but to also reduce some of that overwhelm. A kitchen deep clean, whether it's a practical one or a full blown all weekend deep clean, it is another thing that you have to do that eats up time. So keep your day as simple as you can so that way you can focus on the things that matter during your deep clean. And you're also cleaning your kitchen, so you don't want to mess it up right away with cooking. So I'll show you how I handle dinner after a deep clean here in a few minutes. But first, I also really want to clean out my 2 utensil drawers. In my kitchen island, I have 2 drawers, and in one, I keep all of our everyday silverware and knives. And then in the other are things like measuring cups, measuring spoons, sort of like odds and ends for utensils. So I don't know if I've ever really cleaned these things out. And I noticed the other day that they had a lot of crumbs and stuff in them. So I took everything out of them, and the one is wood. So I didn't want to wash it, but I just wiped it down and got everything out. And then I did the same thing I did with the counters. If it's not something we use all the time, it did not go back in that drawer. So I actually pitched a couple of things. I have a couple of things that I'll be donating. And then anything else that we actually use went back into the drawer in a really tidy fashion. And then I did the same for the other drawer, except that insert's actually plastic, so I was able to wash it. I like the way the wood one looks, but I like that I can wash the plastic one. So I'm not actually sure why I have 2 different ones. Somehow that just ended up that way. But I actually think I kind of prefer the plastic one just because it is easier to wash. One thing that I've done a lot in this video that I haven't talked about yet though is wiping down the fronts of the cabinets. So in my January kitchen deep clean, which I'll link in the description box below, I used my steam cleaner to clean the front of the cabinets and it worked like a dream. But I really didn't have the time on this day to get the steam cleaner out. But also, they really didn't get that dirty between the time I steam cleaned them and now. That steam cleaner took off a lot of dirt and grime, and it's been a lot easier to keep up with those sorts of surfaces since steam cleaning them one time. So on this day, all I did was take a damp rag and just wipe down the fronts of the cabinets and then also the insides of the door, especially where our hands touch. Over at the end of our island, I have this little cart that I pushed over there. We really want to extend our island, but right now it's just not in the budget. So we're just waiting for the economy to change a little bit before we invest in our home that way. So I keep this little cart that I had in my dining room there right now. But on that, I keep this box where I put my daughter's art. So that way, anytime when we come home from school, I can take all of her art and put it right in that little box before we even get in the house. And then I also keep my cookbooks there. So I wipe down all of those cookbooks and I wipe down that box. Cookbooks collect a ton of dust. They sit around. They look nice in the kitchen, but they definitely sit around and collect a lot of dust and grime. So that's a really easy thing to wipe down and tidy up anytime you're doing a practical deep clean. The other thing I like to do every time I clean my kitchen like this is to wash the filter in my dishwasher. Now, in that January deep clean that I mentioned before, the filter to my dishwasher was so dirty. It was mortifying to put on YouTube, but I did it anyway. But I will say, ever since I switched to the Azure standard dishwasher detergent, my filter has not been dirty at all. I mean, there's like a little bit of grime in there, that's to be expected, but I have barely had to clean it. So in your day-to-day, really pay attention to what products you're using and are they actually making your home cleaner and making your life easier. These days, I just keep around a few cleaning products. Of course, Azure Standard's dishwasher detergent. I do keep around regular dish soap for hand washing. Dr. Bronner's soap, vinegar and lemon juice with a little water will go a long, long way. I keep around some stainless steel wipes and Barkeeper's Friend. But other than that, I don't use a lot of cleaning products because I found that generally a lot of those commercial cleaning products, they might smell kind of good, but they actually leave a lot of residue and it's not getting things as clean as I would like them to be, which makes a deep clean even harder. One of the spots in my kitchen that's the hardest to keep up with is around the sink. There's just a lot of water and soap and dishes and food that gets back there. So I save the actual sink basin for the very end of the day because like I said before, it's just kind of filling up with dishes all day long. But I do like to wipe down behind the faucet. I like to clean the faucet itself and definitely get the windowsill here. A lot of dust collects here. I have these plants on the windowsill that I have just because honestly, I meant to plant them like months ago in a pot. I just never did. So they're just still sitting there. So I'm just moving them and wiping them down. The one thing I really need to do, which is not really a kitchen deep clean, but I do need to get outside and clean the outsides of those windows, but that will just happen a different day. It's definitely not for today. So I like to wipe those parts down. And then when I wrap everything up, I really like to make the house smell good. I don't use a lot of cleaning products with a lot of odors, but I do have these little DIY plugins that I like to use. I got these on Amazon. I'll leave a link for those in the description box, but you just fill them with a little bit of essential oils and some water and plug them in. The one thing is they don't last long. They only last for like 2 to 3 days. So I do recommend using inexpensive essential oils like lavender or something like that because it does roll through it pretty quickly. But last up for a kitchen deep clean is don't dirty your kitchen that day if possible. So I am just throwing a freezer meal that I made a few weeks ago. I have a video actually with those 50 freezer meals that I'll leave in the description box, but I'm just throwing that in the Instant Pot. It is mess free and we can enjoy the rest of our day in a really clean kitchen. When I'm doing a Sunday reset, I try to keep 3 things at the forefront of my mind: cheap, convenient, and efficient. And now every Sunday reset looks different. If you've watched my Sunday resets over the last few months, they all are very different. But at the heart of any Sunday reset, the goals are frugality, convenience, and efficiency, both in the reset itself and how it pays in dividends during the week ahead. So for me on this Sunday reset, step 1 is frugality by using what I have without buying more groceries. So I am roasting up a bunch of veggies that I have that are about to go bad. Now here I am actually soaking some leeks. When leeks grow, they pick up a lot of dirt and that can be hard to rinse out. So I am letting them soak in a dish while I chop up the rest of the veggies. But even though we're talking about frugality in this moment, this also intersects with efficiency because I can't spend a ton of time doing this on this particular Sunday reset because I only have a couple hours to get as much done as I can. So one of the things I like to do for a Sunday reset is to just roast all of the veggies that I have in the fridge on one sheet pan. So that way I don't have to think of a ton of recipes. I don't have to do something different with every single one. One sheet pan, a bunch of veggies, and then we can have them throughout the week. To really keep the process streamlined, anytime I roast vegetables, I roast them at 425, and then I usually use either an herb butter or a little olive oil and salt and pepper, which is what I'm doing here. Maybe halfway through, I stir them up a little bit just to make sure that they are cooking evenly, but that is it. The thing about cooking from scratch and a Sunday reset is that it has to be simple or it's not going to be done. But even simple things can feel like a lot of work during the week if they aren't convenient, like baking bread, for example. So this footage here you're seeing is actually from a couple of days ago. In fact, if you watched my recent video about converting all-purpose flour to fresh milled flour, you've probably seen some of this. So here about, I'd say 5 or 6 days ago, I made rye bread. It was 1/3 fresh milled rye, 1/3 fresh milled hard white wheat, and then the remainder was store-bought bread flour. And so I made this double batch of dough with the intention of baking half now and then cold proofing the remainder for later in the week. And this is a really great hack if you want to make homemade sourdough bread but feel like you don't have time. I have a full blog post about how to store sourdough dough in the fridge and how to freeze it if you're trying to work sourdough into a busy schedule. I'll leave those in the description box. But keeping sourdough dough on hand like that is a really easy way to add scratch-made food into your routine, especially if you have it ready for a Sunday reset. Okay, so we are back to present day, and that dough has been in the fridge, I think, for 5 or 6 days, and I am finally going to bake it. The thing about cold proofing sourdough dough is that it does have a time limit. So 3 days is usually about the max. Depending on what type of flour you're using, you might be able to get 5 out of it. But with that fresh milled flour, this did overproof, but it is still totally usable. And if we're talking about being frugal and also keeping things easy and convenient, we don't ever want to waste dough, even if it's over fermented, because it's still usable. In this case, I could still make bread out of it. But if it over ferments enough that it's soupy or just really can't hold its shape, you can always mix it back up with a little bit more flour and then make flatbreads or tortillas. I've even just kind of flattened it out and put it on a baking sheet and made like just a giant, really flat loaf of bread, and it was really good. But if we're talking about being frugal, we don't want to waste that dough. And if we're talking about convenience, having dough around for homemade bread on a whim is so convenient. So sort of in the same vein as when I was talking about roasting veggies, I always do it the same way at the same temperature. I do the same thing when I'm making rustic no-knead sourdough. I always bake it at 500 degrees in a Dutch oven with the lid on for about 25 minutes, and then I take the lid off and bake it for about 12 minutes at 475. And having that streamlined process just takes a lot of the mental effort out of it, which is really important on something like a Sunday reset when you might have a lot of projects going on in the kitchen. Now you can tell that this was overproofed because the bread didn't get that much of a rise and there are some pretty big holes in it. So that's an indicator, but it is still delicious, beautiful bread. Now everything I'm making today, I think intersects with frugality, convenience, and efficiency. But when it comes to efficiency in the kitchen, the Instant Pot is the winner. So I know we're talking a little bit about frugality too, and you're probably looking at these eggs thinking like, hey, it is February 2025 and eggs are the most expensive they've ever been. But I actually get my eggs from someone who has chickens and I get them for $5 a dozen. So if you don't have access to affordable eggs, you can still think about efficiency using your Instant Pot. I love to make big batches of rice and freeze them for later use, or I'd like to do the same thing with dry beans and then I freeze them so that way I can throw them in soups and stews. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Instant Pot boiled eggs like I'm making now, but I'd like to think about how can I utilize the Instant Pot during a Sunday reset to keep things really efficient, because while it's going, I can do other things. Now, to make Instant Pot hard boiled eggs, you can head over to my blog at moonandmagnolia.com and get the full instructions. But in short, this is what's called the 5-5-5 method. It's 5 minutes in the Instant Pot, 5 minutes with a natural release, and then 5 minutes in an ice bath. And you can see that process makes these eggs peel like a dream. Now, I've heard that how easily an egg peels depends on the type of chicken it was. I don't know if that's true or not, but in my experience, putting them in that ice bath has consistently made eggs easier to peel. And you can see these peel like a dream. They are beautiful. And I like to keep these around for a snack. You can make deviled eggs. And in a minute, I'll show you that I'm going to make egg salad with them. But first, I need to get this sourdough bread ready for the freezer. So when you freeze sourdough bread, what I like to do is separate it with just a little piece of parchment paper so that way it doesn't freeze together. So baking the bread today and throwing in the freezer keeps it fresh for longer. So that fresh milled flour will mold faster. It's kind of crazy how fast fresh milled flour will mold. So that way I don't have to worry about not getting through it in time. When we want a piece, we just take it out. It thaws really quickly, or you can even toast it up from frozen. But one of the things I really like to do is use sourdough toast as a vessel for other delicious things. So with those Instant Pot boiled eggs, I am making a really easy egg salad for us to enjoy today, but also to have for lunch throughout the week. And I know that egg salad doesn't sound revolutionary, but that's the thing about a Sunday reset. For it to be frugal and convenient and efficient, it just needs to be simple. So this was a $5 dozen of eggs that I cooked in the Instant Pot in 15 minutes. And now I'm throwing in just a little bit of mayonnaise, 2 spoonfuls of relish, and a little bit of mustard. I really like my egg salad to kind of taste like a deviled egg, but if you have a recipe you love, of course, you should follow that one. And then I'm just stirring it together. And now we have delicious food to eat throughout the week that only costs a couple dollars, but we get a number of meals out of that. When I'm prepping food for convenience for the week ahead, I really like to think about what do we need that week. And this coming week for us is very busy. My daughter is turning 4. She has a school birthday party, her own birthday party with her friends, and then another friend's birthday party to go to. And we have a ton of stuff going on. So I don't really want things like freezer meals that I have to thaw and put in the oven for an hour. I want food that is really easy grab and go style. One of the things that I'm also making in the spirit of grab and go and just really quick food is biscuit pizzas. So this has become one of my daughter's all-time favorite things. I made a bunch of biscuits for sourdough biscuits and gravy that I had on my country cooking video. I'll put that in the description box below. And I've been turning the leftover biscuits into little pizzas. So first I just slice them and I spray them with a little avocado oil just to toast them so that way the sauce doesn't soak in and make them soggy. And then I just take whatever leftover cheese I have in the fridge. I had some leftover raw cheddar cheese from my last Azure order and a little little bit of mozzarella, and then I just put that right in my cast iron skillet, put a little sauce and cheese on there and bake them. And this is super simple and easy. It's kind of like a French bread pizza, but an elevated version. And what I really like about this is that they're also grab and go style. They're small, they're easy, and my almost 4-year-old really likes to eat them cold, so we can just take them right out of the fridge and we are on the move for the rest of the week. Sunday resets like this really lend themselves to pantry challenges. If you haven't heard of a pantry challenge, it's just a time that you use what you have and buy only the absolute essentials, or if you have enough, don't buy any groceries at all during that time. I have a free 10-day pantry challenge available over my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I will leave a link in the description box for signing up. But in this 10-day challenge, you will get daily emails, and each email includes a private podcast, a free printable, and a ton of recipes to inspire you along the way. Again, I will leave a link for that in the description box below.